My son sold the house I helped him buy and let his wife burn through nearly $300,000 like it was free money. Then they showed up at my doorstep with suitcases, expecting to move into my home, uninvited. When I refused, she slapped me across the face in front of my neighbors. That same evening, I opened my safe, pulled out the loan contract they thought I forgot about, and called my lawyer. A week later, they weren't laughing anymore. They were begging not to lose everything. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. The phone rang just as I was settling in with my evening tea, Earl Grey, the way Margaret always made it, steeped exactly 4 minutes, splash of milk. I still make it that way, though it never tastes quite the same without her humming in the kitchen. The sun was dipping behind the oaks outside, and the cicadas were just starting up. I glanced at the screen. Bryan. My son. Hey, Dad! He chirped. You won't believe this, we sold the house. I blinked. What do you mean, sold the house? We got an offer for $680 cash. No inspection, nothing. Took it immediately. I sat back in the worn armchair by the window, the old wood groaning under my weight. Bryan, you sold the house? The one you and Elise bought just 3 years ago? Yeah. The market's insane right now. Elise found a buyer through one of her friends at yoga. They wired the deposit this morning. I stared out at the street. Mrs. Carmichael was walking her golden retriever again. Bryan, what about the $290,000 I gave you for that house? There was a pause, not long, but long enough for my gut to twist. Dad, he said with a forced laugh. Come on. We've been over this. You gave us that money. You said it was a family investment. No, son, I said slowly. I said it was a loan. You even signed paperwork with Marcus, remember? We did it by the book. Another pause. I don't remember signing anything official. You know how family stuff goes, Dad. It's all love, right? You've got the pension, the insurance from Mom, the house. You're set. My hand tightened around the ceramic mug. I gave you that money because you said it was your dream home. You promised you'd pay it back when you could. That's what you said? In this room. At that table. Look, Elise is already planning a few things we need. New furniture, a short getaway, maybe even that BMW she's been eyeing. Wait, I said, sitting upright. You're spending the money? Well, yeah. It's ours now. I mean, it's what you wanted, right? To help us get on our feet? I stood, moving toward my desk without thinking. The drawer stuck, it always did, but I yanked it open and pulled out the manila folder I hadn't touched in years. Inside were printouts, emails, even the scanned loan agreement. And that thank you card. You're the best, Dad. We'll pay you back, promise. Signed in Elisa's curly handwriting. Bryan, I said, voice low. I have the documents right here. You did sign something. Come on, Dad, he said, his tone souring. You're not really gonna play lawyer on me now, are you? We're family. We are, I said. But that doesn't erase an agreement. He sighed, and in the background I could hear the engine of their car idling. I gotta go. Elise is waiting. Bryan. But the line went dead. I stood there in the middle of my study, phone in one hand, folder in the other. The sun had dipped lower now, and the house was full of shadows. Margaret's photo on the bookshelf caught the last of the light, her smile forever frozen in that soft, amused way she used to look at me when I got too wrapped up in logic and lists. What would she say about all this? Probably something sharp. She never did tolerate excuses, not from Bryan, not from anyone. I lowered myself into the chair, the folder resting heavy on my lap. My son had just told me, in so many words, that my support was a gift. That I should be happy he was spending my money on a BMW and spa days instead of returning it. That our agreement didn't matter because it was inconvenient. I opened the folder again. The signature was there. His. Elise's. Marcus's notary seal. I reached for a pen. My hand no longer shook. If Bryan thought he could twist generosity into stupidity, he was about to find out something important. I might have given him a loan out of love, but I wasn't about to be used. Not again. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly overhead, the blades whispering the same sentence again and again. You said it was a gift. It wasn't the words that kept me awake. It was the ease with which he said them. Like they meant nothing. Like I meant nothing. By morning, I had decided, resolved, that I wouldn't let it go. Margaret used to say I had the patience of a saint and the memory of a filing cabinet. She was right on both counts. And that memory of mine was now taking inventory. After breakfast, plain toast and a single poached egg I didn't even taste, I returned to my study. The manila folder still sat on the desk where I'd left it. I pulled up my old wooden chair, clicked on the desk lamp, and laid everything out. I started with the bank records. June 12, 2020. Withdrawal of $290,000 from my retirement fund. I remember signing the paperwork at First Southern Bank. Marcus had called it a big favor with a big risk. I hadn't thought of it as either. Next came the email chain. Bryan's request, full of enthusiastic bullet points. Dream home found! Great school district for when we have kids! Need help fast. Sellers pushing to close. My response had been measured but hopeful. I'd asked questions. He'd answered. Then Elise had chimed in. Mr. Simmons, we truly don't know who else to turn to. This would change everything for us. She always knew how to say the right thing. Too much so, in hindsight. Then, the thank you card. Still taped shut inside. I opened it gently, like it might tear if I breathed wrong. Dear Dad, thank you for believing in us. We know this is huge, and we promise to pay you back. Every penny. You're the best. Love, Bryan and Elise. I held it under the desk lamp, watching the ink glint slightly on the page. I remembered how she'd handed it to me with a bouquet of lilies, Margaret's favorite, like the whole thing was a birthday present instead of a legal transaction. I placed it down and opened the contract. Marcus had drafted it on his office letterhead. 8 pages. Clear language. Terms defined. Signed by all 3 of us. Notarized. It wasn't just some handshake deal. It was binding. Ironclad. And Bryan had signed it without reading a single word. I remember that day too well. We'd met in Marcus's office downtown. I wore a jacket. Bryan showed up in jeans and flip-flops. Elise was 15 minutes late and complained the entire time about the formality of it all. Come on, Marcus, she had said, laughing. We're family. Do we really need all this legal mumbo-jumbo? Marcus had just smiled, professional and unfazed. It's not about distrust. It's about clarity. This protects everyone. Bryan hadn't protested, not out loud. But I remember the way his smile faltered when he saw the total figure printed in bold on the first page. I remember how he hesitated before putting pen to paper. You know I'm good for this, right? He'd asked me under his breath. I know, I had said. And I had meant it. Now I wasn't so sure. The memory was still playing in my head as I flipped back to the final page. Bryan's signature was there, scribbled fast but legible. Elisa's signature more careful, deliberate. Marcus's witness line. And the notary seal from his paralegal, Jenna. Everything was in place. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't misremembering. I'd been used, yes, but not fooled. I sat back, hands folded in my lap. The sunlight was coming through the blinds now, cutting the room into neat stripes. Margaret's photo sat on the bookshelf, her smile that same half-knowing smirk, like she just called the ending of a mystery movie 10 minutes in. Should have listened to you more often, I muttered aloud. My eyes went back to the documents. I began organizing them, not just emotionally but physically. Dates. Categories. Cross-references. I made 2 piles, emotional and legal. The thank you card, old texts, and family photos went in one. The contract, emails, and bank statements in the other. And then I scanned them. Every page. High resolution. Labeled folders on my desktop, /Bryan_loan_contract / evidence_for_Marcus /. It felt clarifying. By late afternoon, everything was in its place. I even printed an extra copy of the contract and slid it into a fresh folder. I wasn't going to let this turn into some messy, he said/she said, situation. No, if Bryan wanted to pretend this never happened, if Elise thought they could rewrite history, they were going to run face first into the truth. On paper. With ink. The phone sat silent beside me, but I could almost hear it ringing. Sooner or later, they were going to show up. And when they did, I needed to be ready, not just with facts, but with resolve. Because if there's one thing I learned as a school principal for 30 years, it's this. When someone shows you who they are, don't mark it tardy. Mark it permanent record. It was a little after 7 a.m. when the pounding started. I was still in bed, barely awake, blinking at the pale light coming through the blinds when the sound jolted me upright. Someone was hammering on my front door like the house was on fire. I threw on my robe and shuffled to the window. That's when I saw it, a moving truck in my driveway. A full-size, rented moving truck. Behind it, Bryan's car was parked, trunk open, 2 suitcases leaning against the rear bumper like this was the Hilton. And there they were, my son and Elise, standing on my porch. Elise had her designer sunglasses perched on her head and a bright red suitcase in hand. Bryan had that same crooked smile he used whenever he thought he was doing something clever. Another knock. Harder this time. I opened the door but didn't step aside. What the hell is this? Hey, Dad! Bryan said, too cheerful. We're here. I didn't move. What does here mean? Elise stepped forward, dragging her suitcase across the welcome mat like it belonged to her. Since we sold the house, she said, breezing past my words, we need a place to stay while we find our next one. Just temporary, of course. Bryan nodded, already glancing over my shoulder into the house. Yeah, a couple months tops. Shouldn't be a big deal. My robe barely kept out the morning chill, but I stood my ground. No. Elise's smile didn't falter, not yet. Excuse me? You're not moving in here. This isn't your fallback plan. Bryan laughed, but there was tension behind it now. Dad, don't be like that. You've got all this space. 4 bedrooms, big kitchen, sunroom. You live here alone. That's not your concern. I said. You made your choices. You're damn right we did. Elise snapped. We chose to make a smart financial move. Now we just need a little support. You always said family sticks together. I looked at them, both dressed like they were headed to brunch, not begging for a place to sleep. Elise's handbag probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill. And Bryan? He couldn't even look me in the eye. Across the street, I saw movement. Harold Jenkins was pretending to check his newspaper, but his eyes were locked on us. Curtains twitched in Mrs. Langston's window next door. The neighborhood was waking up. Leave, I said flatly. Bryan's tone shifted. Dad, come on. No, I said again. You sold your house. You spent the money. This isn't your emergency exit. Elise's smile finally cracked. You selfish old man. Bryan winced. Elise. But she stepped closer, finger jabbing toward my chest. You sit here in this big old house like a king while we're out there trying to build a life. You owe us. I owe you? My voice rose without my permission. I loaned you $290,000. You promised to pay it back. Her eyes narrowed. You can't prove that. Actually, I can. Bryan stiffened. Dad, don't do this. You did this. I snapped. And now you're going to live with it. Then Elise, beautiful, polished, and venomous, raised her hand and slapped me across the face. The sound cracked through the morning air. My head turned from the force of it. I stumbled slightly, catching myself against the doorframe. My cheek stung. My pride burned hotter. And for one moment, there was silence. Complete, stunned silence. Then Harold shouted from across the street. "Hey! That's enough!" Bryan grabbed Elise's arm and started pulling her away. "Come on," he muttered, his voice low and panicked. "We're done here. You'll regret this!" Elise screamed, heels clacking as she stormed back to the car. "You'll regret being such a bitter old man!" They slammed the trunk, jumped into the car, and peeled out of my driveway. The moving truck, whose driver had been watching from inside the cab, turned around and followed them, engine grumbling. I stood there, hand pressed to my burning cheek, the morning sun finally breaking over the rooftops. Mrs. Langston was on her porch now. So were the Johnsons. No one said anything, but everyone saw. Harold walked over slowly, coffee mug still in hand. "You okay?" I nodded. "I will be. Good." Because that wasn't just rude. That was assault. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I looked at the empty driveway, the faint skid marks, the silence left behind by the storm. Something shifted in me. Something old and buried, a line I hadn't known I still had. And Elise crossed it. No, I thought. They both did. By the time I closed the door, the house felt different. Not physically, of course. The walls were still painted the same warm ivory Margaret loved. The floors still creaked in that same spot near the stairs. But something in the air had changed, like the insulation had been stripped away, leaving everything colder. Sharper. I moved slowly back to the study, hands still on my cheek. The sting had dulled, but not the humiliation. I passed the hallway where we used to hang Bryan's school photos, each year a little taller, a little surer. Somewhere along the way, the boy in those frames had learned how to smile his way into getting what he wanted. Somewhere, I'd taught him that kindness didn't come with limits. I sat at my desk, staring down at the folder. The same one I'd organized just yesterday. The documents lay in neat rows, emails, statements, and most importantly, the contract. Marcus Bell had drafted it himself, 8 clean pages, typed on his firm's letterhead, with all the legal language required to make it binding. Notarized. Witnessed. Clear as daylight. I flipped to the signature page. There it was, Bryan Simmons, scribbled in that quick, half-sloppy handwriting of his, next to Elise's much neater cursive. My own signature just above, still firm and precise. And the embossed notary stamp beneath it all. No ambiguity. No. Maybe. No gift. Alone, documented and enforceable. I picked up my phone and scrolled to Marcus's number. It had been months since we last spoke, maybe more than a year, but I hadn't deleted it. I pressed call, before I could second-guess myself. He picked up after 2 rings. "Gerald? Now there's a name I haven't seen on caller ID in a while." "Morning, Marcus," I said. "I hope I didn't catch you at a bad time." "Depends. Is this a social call or a legal one?" I exhaled. "Legal." His voice sharpened. "Go on." I laid it out, the call from Bryan, the dismissal of the debt, the unexpected arrival, and the slap on my own front porch. I didn't dramatize it. I didn't have to. When I finished, there was a pause. "Well," Marcus said, his tone cool and professional now, "your son just made a very expensive mistake. You still have the original contract on file?" "I do. But sounds like you've got your copy in good condition too. Notarized, signed, it's airtight." "Honestly, Gerald, I'm impressed you kept everything this organized. Occupational hazard of being a school principal for 30 years. He chuckled. "Well, you're about to put that organization to good use. Let me ask, has Bryan made any payments at all?" "Not a dime." "Then under the default clause, the entire amount becomes immediately due, plus interest. I wrote in an 8% annual accrual, just in case. I did the mental math. That's roughly $69,600 in interest. 3 years of nothing." "Correct." So that brings the total to $359,600. Not counting civil damages if you choose to pursue them. I went silent for a moment. Gerald, he said gently, I've seen a lot of these family disputes over the years. The mistake most people make is assuming that blood erases boundaries. It doesn't. I know, I said quietly. He paused. Do you want to proceed formally? Yes. Then I'll need you to bring everything, copies, your records, any texts or emails. And I'll prepare a demand letter first thing. We'll start with pressure. If they resist, we escalate. I looked at the window, where the early morning sun had given way to overcast skies. They won't pay willingly. Then we make them. After we hung up, I turned back to the contract. I held it in both hands, read every word again, not because I didn't trust it, but because I wanted to feel the weight of it. The precision. The truth. Margaret would have approved of Marcus's language, firm but fair. Protective, not punitive. And she would have hated the idea that our son needed legal action to remember how to be decent. But she would have supported me, too. Fiercely. She always said, being generous doesn't mean being blind. When someone starts taking more than you're offering, that's not love, that's leverage. Well, Bryan had just lost his leverage. I opened the filing cabinet, retrieved a clean folder, and labeled it in black ink, Bryan Simmons, Legal Action. I placed the copies inside, along with my notes. Then I scanned the thank you card, Elise's email, and every document from the day they signed. Everything backed up. Dated. Archived. Bryan thought he could rewrite history. That he could just say it was a gift, and it would become one. That I'd be too old, too soft, too sentimental to do anything about it. But the moment Elise raised her hand to me, the moment I saw Harold watching from across the street, the neighbors frozen on their porches, that's when something in me came back online. Not rage. Not revenge. Resolve. I wasn't just an old man with a paid-off house and a pension. I was a man with a contract. A man with evidence. And I was done being used. By Tuesday morning, the demand letter was drafted, reviewed, and printed on thick cream-colored stationery with Marcus's firm's letterhead in bold at the top. Just holding it in my hands felt like picking up a sword. He'd gone through it line by line with me on the phone the night before. Clear. Calm. Undeniable. You are hereby given 10 days to remit payment of $359,600, representing the full loan amount plus interest accrued per the signed agreement dated June 2020. Failure to comply will result in immediate legal action. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't angry. It was exact, the kind of language that doesn't blink. Marcus couriered the letter to Bryan's address that morning, return receipt requested. But before it even landed on their doorstep, I made a call of my own. I sat at the desk, the contract open beside me, and dialed Bryan's number with hands that didn't shake. He picked up on the third ring. Hey, Dad, he said, casual, like nothing had happened. Look, about the other day. Elise might have gotten a little heated. Bryan, I interrupted. I'm calling to formally demand immediate repayment of the $290,000 loan I provided you for the purchase of your former home. As of today, with interest, the total amount owed is $359,600. Silence. Complete, stunned silence. Then laughter, brittle and defensive. Wait, are you serious? I am. You're trying to shake down your own son? Are you losing it? I didn't answer. Just waited. What loan, Dad? You gave us that money. There's a signed and notarized contract. Drafted by Marcus Bell. You signed it. Elise signed it. It's legally enforceable. Jesus Christ, he muttered. You're actually doing this. You're using a piece of paper against your own family. I'm using the truth. You sold the house. You spent the money. You tried to move into my home uninvited. And your wife struck me in front of witnesses. That was barely a slap. He snapped, his tone shifting now. Defensive. irritated. She didn't mean it. That barely a slap was witnessed by Harold Jenkins, the Johnsons, and half the neighborhood. That alone gives me grounds for a civil suit, assault, emotional distress, and public humiliation. You're blowing this way out of proportion, he said, but his voice cracked at the edges. No, I said. I'm holding you accountable. The line went quiet again. Then I heard Elise's voice in the background, sharp and rising. She must have overheard part of the call. There was a scuffle, and then her voice came through loud and clear. You selfish bastard, she hissed. You're destroying this family over money. You'll regret this. Mrs. Simmons, I said calmly, this call is being recorded. Any threats made here will be included in future court proceedings. There was a pause, then a muffled crash, as if the phone had been snatched away. Bryan's voice returned, tense and breathless. Dad, let's just talk, okay? Man to man. Not lawyers. Not paperwork. Just us. That conversation ended when you decided I was a fool with a fat wallet and no spine. You think suing us is going to fix anything? It'll ruin everything. No, Bryan, I said. It'll clarify everything. You'll regret this. I've documented every threat you've made since Saturday. Every word, every call. Marcus has it all. So go ahead, keep talking. He was breathing hard now. We don't have that kind of money. Even if we wanted to pay, which we don't, we can't. Then you'll need to figure it out, I said, rising from my chair. Liquidate your assets. Sell the car. Return the furniture. Because if you don't, the court will do it for you. This is blackmail. This is contract enforcement. The line went dead. I set the phone down and immediately dialed Marcus. Let me guess, he said. Denial and threats? Exactly. Plus a verbal admission about the slap. Elise called it barely a slap. Bryan said they can't pay. Perfect. That strengthens our case. Emotional abuse, financial manipulation, physical aggression. It's no longer just a contract dispute, it's a full civil action. We agreed to proceed. The demand letter would be delivered by certified courier before noon. Marcus would draft the court filing next, in case they ignored it, which, based on that call, they absolutely would. After I hung up, I stood at the window, watching the neighborhood move through its usual quiet rhythms. Harold was raking leaves. Mrs. Chin walked past with her terrier, gave me a nod through the glass. My cheek no longer burned, but I remembered the moment. Elise's face, twisted with contempt, her hand raised like I was a disobedient child. They'd both misjudged me. They thought kindness meant weakness. That quiet meant passive. That my love for my family made me blind. But what they didn't know, what they never bothered to learn, was that even quiet men have limits. And I'd just reached mine. By Thursday morning, I was no longer the only one talking about what had happened. The neighborhood had seen it, heard it, felt it. Charleston may be a city, but my street? It's a village. The kind where folks wave when they drive by, leave soup on your doorstep when you're sick, and, as it turns out, step up when someone crosses a line. I was sipping my coffee in the kitchen when the doorbell rang. It was Harold Jenkins, holding his usual chipped mug in one hand and a solemn look in the other. Hope I'm not interrupting, he said. Not at all, I replied, motioning him in. Coffee? Already got my ration, he said, holding up the mug with a nod. I just wanted to check on you. We sat at the table. The same table where Bryan and Elise once asked me for help like it was sacred ground. Harold cleared his throat. The whole street's been talking, Gerald. I figured. Most of them are shocked. The Johnsons said they couldn't believe what they saw. Mrs. Chen's ready to march into court if you need a witness. I set my cup down, slowly. Witness for what? Harold's eyes narrowed slightly. You mean you haven't filed yet? The demand letter's gone out. Legal filing's next. He leaned back in his chair. Good. Because what that woman did wasn't just rude. It was criminal. You don't strike a man on his own porch and walk away smiling. She didn't smile. I said. She screamed. That too, he muttered. I glanced out the window. Mrs. Chin was walking her little terrier again, pausing at each tree as if waiting for me to look out and wave. When she spotted me, she raised her hand in a tight, determined gesture, not quite a wave. More like a vow. She told me. Harold continued. Bet she heard the whole thing. Said Elise shouted about you being a selfish old man. That's accurate. Tom Patterson saw it too. He added. He was across the street with his garden hose. He's furious. He said, and I quote, if my kids ever pulled that stunt, I'd disown them on the spot. I smiled slightly. Tom wasn't known for subtlety. What are you thinking, Gerald? Harold asked gently. I'm thinking I spent my life trying to give Bryan everything I could. A good childhood. An education. A clean slate. And when I gave him more than I should have, nearly $300,000, he called it a gift. Harold nodded slowly. And when I said no, I continued, he let his wife slap me in front of the neighbors. Harold looked me in the eye. So what are you going to do? I didn't hesitate. I'm going to finish what I started. He smiled, not a happy smile, but a satisfied one. Good. Because if you need me, I'll testify. I saw the whole thing. I might take you up on that. As Harold left, Mrs. Chin was just reaching my porch. She was carrying a ceramic dish covered with foil, her brows drawn together in a look of fierce intent. Soup, she said, holding it out. You need nourishment. You've had a hell of a week. I accepted it gratefully. Thank you, May. And if that woman thinks she can strike people in our neighborhood and walk away, she's wrong. I blinked. You'd be willing to testify? Of course. I was at the window. Heard every word. Saw the whole thing. Even wrote some of it down. You took notes? Retired court reporter. She said proudly. Old habits die hard. I almost laughed. Don't let them make you feel like the bad guy. She added. You did what any decent man would do. You said no to being taken advantage of. I nodded. Thank you. Also, she said, turning back as she reached the bottom step. That slap? It wasn't barely anything. It echoed down the whole street. And I've got hearing aids. After she left, I carried the soup back into the kitchen, hard heavier, but steadier. Support didn't change what Bryan had done. But it reminded me I wasn't alone. Not anymore. This wasn't just my battle. They had tried to humiliate me in public. But now, it was public that would help hold them accountable. The first sign of panic came 2 days after the demand letter landed on their doorstep. Marcus called me Saturday morning, sounding pleased. Well, Gerald, looks like the pressure's working. We got a call from a lawyer representing your son. He actually hired one? Apparently. A young guy named Patrick Lively. Fresh out of law school from what I can tell. Probably charging them pennies just to pad his experience. I leaned back in my chair. What does he want? A meeting, Marcus said. They want to negotiate. Negotiate what? Marcus gave a low chuckle. That's what we're going to find out. We scheduled it for Monday morning. Marcus's office. Conference room. Clean, quiet, professional. No emotion, just the facts. I arrived 10 minutes early. Marcus was already there, wearing the same tailored gray suit he wore when we signed the original loan. The contract lay on the table between us like a loaded weapon. You ready for this? He asked, handing me a cup of coffee. I've never been readier. At exactly 9 a.m., Patrick Lively walked in. Mid-20s. Nervous energy. Hair combed a little too precisely, suit a little too big. He was followed by Bryan, who looked tired, and Elise, who looked furious. I didn't stand. Neither did Marcus. Mr. Simmons, Patrick began, pulling out a file. My clients are prepared to offer a settlement they believe is fair and reasonable. Marcus didn't blink. Let's hear it. Patrick glanced at Bryan, who avoided my gaze entirely, then cleared his throat. $50,000 up front, followed by monthly payments of $2,000 until the balance is repaid. I did the math in my head. That would take more than 12 years, not including interest. I turned to Marcus, but he was already shaking his head. Absolutely not, he said. Unacceptable. Patrick shifted. My clients are operating with limited liquidity at the moment. The proceeds from the house sale have already been allocated. To what? Marcus asked flatly. Patrick hesitated. Household needs. I raised an eyebrow. Mercedes payments and spa vacations are household needs now? Elise crossed her arms and glared at me. We had to get new furniture. We moved. No one forced you to sell your house, I replied. No one forced you to spend $300,000 in 6 weeks. And certainly no one forced you to show up on my porch like squatters. Patrick raised a hand, attempting to salvage the tone. Mr. Simmons, my clients are open to compromise. They're even willing to provide a written apology regarding the incident. Marcus gave a sharp laugh. You mean the assault? With 4 witnesses? That's a civil case on its own. You wouldn't really take this to court, Elise said. You'd put your own son through all that? Over money? I looked at her steady. I'm not doing this to him. He did this to himself. Bryan finally looked up at me. His eyes were tired. Hollow. You really won't budge on this? He asked quietly. I budged the day I wrote you that check. That was my line. You crossed it. And then your wife slapped me in my own doorway. Elise rolled her eyes. Barely a slap. Marcus opened his folder and slid a document across the table. Here are our terms. Full repayment of $359,600 within 90 days. If payment is not made, we proceed with court filing and asset seizure. We're also pursuing an additional $50,000 in civil damages for assault, emotional distress, and public humiliation. Total due, $409,600. Patrick read the paper, lips thinning with every line. This is aggressive. No, Marcus said. It's justice. I'll need time to discuss this with my clients. You have 48 hours, Marcus replied. After that we file. The meeting ended with stiff handshakes, or none at all. Elise stormed out first. Bryan followed, not even glancing back at me. Patrick lingered a moment. Mr. Simmons, I'm just trying to find a path forward. So am I said. But there's only one path here, and it leads through accountability. After they left, Marcus and I remained in the conference room. The morning sun was beginning to warm the windowpane. You think they'll pay? I asked. Marcus exhaled through his nose. Bryan might. He's cracking. But she'll fight until she's bankrupt. I'm fine with that, I said. Let her learn that charm doesn't cancel out consequence. Marcus smiled. We're close, Gerald. A couple more pushes, and they'll either cave or break. I nodded. Either one's fine with me. That evening, I sat alone on the porch with a glass of iced tea. The same porch where Elise had tried to take everything I had, my house, my boundaries, my dignity, with one entitled slap. Now, all she'd taken was a seat at the negotiation table. And I was the one flipping the pages. The call came on the second evening, 43 hours after Marcus handed them the ultimatum. I was sitting in my study, rereading the demand letter for what must have been the 10th time, when my cell phone buzzed on the desk. Bryan. I let it ring once. Twice. Then I picked up and said nothing. Dad? His voice was different this time. No smugness. Just brittle, stretched thin nerves. We got the revised offer. I assumed as much, I said, calm as a judge. There was a pause. I heard background noise, what sounded like Elisa's voice, sharp and distant, like an argument just out of frame. Bryan lowered his voice. $409,000, Dad? You can't be serious. I'm dead serious. Do you think we're made of money? I think you were briefly, before you burned through it like paper in a bonfire. His voice tightened. You're trying to ruin us. I gave you a lifeline, Bryan. You turned it into a rope to climb over me. There was another pause, this one heavier. I imagined him in their rented apartment, or maybe a hotel room, Elise pacing like a caged animal. They probably hadn't expected me to actually push this far. They were expecting guilt. They got consequences. I've spoken to other lawyers, Bryan said finally. Some of them think the contract might not hold. That you'll look bad in front of a judge. Good, I replied. Let's see how it holds up in court. He hesitated. You're really prepared to do this? I am. And your wife's assault makes this more than just money now. A sigh, long defeated. She didn't mean to hit you. She raised her hand. She meant it. Whether she regretted it 5 seconds later is irrelevant. And I have 4 witnesses who saw it happen. There was another muffled sound in the background, this time Elise's voice much closer. Give me the damn phone. She snapped. No, I heard Bryan whisper. Then put it on speaker. The line shifted, and suddenly Elise's voice came through directly. You selfish old man. She hissed. You think this is going to make you look like some hero? You're pathetic. Elise, I said evenly. This call is being recorded, just like the last one. You're bluffing. No, Bryan muttered. He's not. She scoffed. What do you even want from us? Blood? An apology? I want accountability, I said. And yes, you will provide a written apology for striking me. It's in the demand. You're disgusting. She spat. Suing your own son. Taking money from your future grandchildren. If I ever have grandchildren, I said, I'd like to be able to tell them their father learned how to take responsibility for his actions. That he wasn't allowed to lie, steal, and hit his way through life. You're destroying our family. No, Elise. You tried to move into my home without permission. You spent money that didn't belong to you. You assaulted me in front of witnesses. You destroyed the illusion of family. There was silence. I could hear Bryan breathing, short, clipped, shallow. Then a small sound that surprised me, a chair creaking, like someone finally sat down after pacing for too long. Dad, he said, voice low. We don't have that kind of money. Even if we wanted to pay, which Elise doesn't, we can't. We'd have to sell everything. Then sell everything. A pause. We'd be broke. You already are. You just haven't admitted it yet. You'd really leave us with nothing? No. I'd leave you with a lesson. The line was dead quiet now. Then Elise spoke again. When this is over, she said coldly, you'll never see us again. You'll die alone in that big empty house, and no one will come to your funeral. I nodded slowly. If that's the cost of peace, I'll pay it gladly. She laughed, hollow and bitter. We'll fight you. You have no idea what we're capable of. I have every idea, I replied. That's why I have a lawyer. And witnesses. And a contract you both signed. The line went dead. I set the phone down gently. Then I picked it up again and dialed Marcus. Let me guess, he said without preamble. They didn't take it well? They threatened retaliation. Again. Admitted they don't have the money. Elise called me a pathetic old man and said I'd die alone. Charming! Bryan scared. I added. I could hear it. Good, Marcus said. Fear gets people moving. The pressure's working. What's next? We file in court, he said. If they don't respond with full payment in the next 3 days, we initiate the asset seizure process. It won't be quick, but it'll be effective. I looked down at the contract on my desk, the same one Bryan had signed 3 years ago with a careless flick of his wrist. He never expected it would mean anything. He expected me to fold. Instead, I'd found my backbone. My documents. My voice. And he just found out what happens when a man who's always been patient finally decides he's done waiting. The final call came just before sunset, 3 days after our deadline passed. I was in the garden out back, pulling weeds from the flower beds Margaret once tended. It felt good to have my hands in the soil again, grounding, literal. I hadn't realized how much I needed that until the phone rang in my pocket. Bryan. This time, I answered without hesitation. We accept the terms, he said. No greeting. No preamble. Just 5 words dragged through gravel. I didn't respond immediately. I let the silence stretch. We'll pay it all, he continued. Every cent. Elise is liquidating her jewelry. We sold the car. We're borrowing against what's left of my retirement. I stared out over the freshly turned earth. How soon? Marcus will have the first transfer within 10 business days. The rest will follow in tranches. We'll meet the 90-day deadline. Another pause. She wants to send a written apology, he added. For the slap. For everything. I closed my eyes. Margaret's wind chimes whispered above the porch, their notes soft and tired. Good, I said. Bryan sighed. Is that all you have to say? I warned you, Bryan. I gave you a path out. You didn't take it. There was a rustle on the other end, papers maybe. Then his voice again, lower this time. After this is over, after we pay you back, do you think we could ever? No, I said. He fell quiet. You don't rebuild a bridge by painting over the ashes, I said. You do it with actions. With time. Maybe. But there's no guarantee. That's harsh. No, I replied. That's honest. And it's what you've needed for a long time. I heard him swallow. You're not the man I thought you were. I am. You just thought I'd never say enough. I hung up without another word. Inside, the study was lit with the soft gold of early evening. I opened the drawer, took out the contract one last time, and placed it alongside the new folder Marcus had labeled, Settlement Confirmed. I didn't feel joy. Or revenge. I felt still. A calm I hadn't known in years settled over the house. They had tried to take everything, and now, slowly, they were paying it back. Not just the money. But the cost of thinking I'd never stand up for myself. The last payment arrived on a Thursday. Marcus called to confirm it hit the escrow account, a wire transfer from Bryan and Elisa's new attorney, this one with better grammar and less optimism. The full amount, down to the penny. Loan repaid. Interest added. Damages settled. Just like that, the paper trail was complete. No calls followed. No apology letters. Not even a confirmation email. They disappeared into silence. And for the first time in what felt like years, that silence was a gift. I walked through the house that afternoon, letting the quiet settle into every room. The guest room, once invaded without consent, was now empty again. Clean. The spare key they had once duplicated without asking was long destroyed. My locks had been changed, and so had I. I didn't feel victorious. I felt intact. There's a difference. Victory is for wars. But this wasn't a war, it was a correction. A realignment. A painful but necessary shift to remind everyone, especially me, that boundaries matter. That kindness isn't weakness. That love without respect corrodes into obligation. I spent the weekend fixing the fence along the backyard. A literal boundary, now strong again. Paint fresh, nails driven firm. The way it should have always been. On Sunday, I sat on the porch with a glass of lemonade and a worn photo of Margaret. I'd tucked it away after things with Bryan spiraled. Looking at her had hurt too much, like I was failing the life we built. But now it felt like I'd done right by both of us. You would have told me to stand my ground, I said to the photo. But you'd have still baked Elise a pie. I chuckled softly, imagining Margaret handing Elise a homemade dessert and a court summons in the same breath. The chimes above me stirred gently in the breeze. Across the street, the neighbors waved. I raised my hand in return. They remembered the slap, the shouting, the police car that had idled once at the end of the driveway. But they also saw the man who'd endured it without breaking. Sometimes dignity isn't loud. It's not dramatic. Sometimes it just looks like an old man drinking lemonade in the house he still calls home, on his terms. I don't know if Bryan will ever come back, if years from now we'll reconnect. Maybe. Maybe not. But I do know one thing. The next time someone knocks on my door expecting to take without giving, they'll find it locked. And the spare room? It's no longer theirs. It's mine again.